Okay, so if we are going to be dealing with imported textures at all, not textures meaning materials like, oh, I put a Lambert, a blend with specularity, and not things that are generated in Maya, but actual imported textures wherein this is a picture, right, that exists somewhere else, and we are bringing it into Maya to be projected onto this frame. In order to do that, there's a couple things we have to set up, and one of them is a project, because if you are going to be handing in work that has any kind of mapped textures on it, you need to hand in an entire project folder and it needs to be set up properly. Otherwise, I can't see the work that you did, and that would suck. So we've talked about projects before, but we haven't had to use them for the most part because we've only been doing modeling and lighting and materials. So the way this works is I have, first of all, over in Windows, this is my general school folder, and I have one I called Final Project, right? Like you're all working on your final project. That's going to be the project folder. So, but right now there's nothing in here that really needs to be happening. So, File, you go down here to the Project section, and it says Project Window. And right now, I look and it tells me, okay, my current project is 3D materials. Well, that's not correct. So now I know I need it to be something else. So what I can do, it's probably going off of the last thing I did. I can say File, Set Project, and I can find the final project. Do not double click on this. I see this a lot. People go to set their final project, they double click, it brings them in the folder. No, you have to single click to simply select your final project folder and then hit Set. And then it says this does not require contain the something workspace. I can say create a default workspace. So it has to create a file, and it actually just created it. Popped up right here. It's a workspace file. It's just a little Maya internal kind of file. But now if I go to File, Project Window, it says this, which is good. And it says primary project locations. Now, unfortunately, those locations do not exist yet. All right, so if we were to try and click here to go into scenes, it says nothing, and same for the other ones. Now, you may not need all of these folders. You will definitely need a scenes folder, images, source images. It's probably all we need for this class, but we can leave all of these in here. They come in pretty handy. And what'll happen is we open up the project window. Let's see if I can get this to work, because I tested it once, so it may not do it a second time. Haha, okay. So this is the inside of that final project folder. And right now it just has a few files. And then out here, it's telling me what it wants to have for all of the folders for organization. And then, so I hit accept. Haha. And it creates all of the folders we need. And I can hit save here for a moment and close this. I have to close it. And I have to close the other one as well. And it's going to take its sweet time. So I'm going to come back here. And I have 2 Maya files in here, 2 Maya scene files and 2 images. So my images should actually go in the images folder. Well, actually, nope, I'm sorry, source images. Source images is where all of your texture stuff is going to come in. That's where it's going to look at default, by default, for those things. And now that Maya file's closed, my scene files should go in here. And so now when I open these, I've moved them, but they're now in the scene file. If you're starting from scratch, if you don't already have files, then you can just Maya new project, create a new project, and then as soon as you go to make a new file, it should try to open in the scenes file. Now this texture probably isn't going to work because, yeah, I broke it. That's okay. All right. So if I go to File, Save Scene As, no, it's still, see, when you switch between projects the way I'm doing now, it can sometimes get, yeah, it doesn't know I'm in this project yet. So I say set project. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to remember it for your file. It seems to remember it for the computer. So now if I go to, I did set project, I chose the final project, I go to save scene as, there it is. Okay, final project scenes, and it'll bring it in here. And I do this as a test. I don't actually need to make a new file right now. But you really, 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 before you start texturing, need to make sure that this thing knows that it is set to the right project, right? You go to final or file, project window, make sure it says final project here. And if it doesn't, you say file, set project, and then you choose that folder. And again, do not double click. This is a problem. People do this all the time and then they can't set it and they set it to something else in here and it becomes a mess. Simply single click and hit set. And then you can, the easiest test is to say, oh, if I go save scene as, does it want me to put it in the scenes folder for this final project folder? Why, yes, it does. Because testing this with any textures would be much more difficult. And if I want to fix the fact that this kind of broke after the fact, because I did move everything, you're supposed to set this up ahead of time. I can go into here to get to this file and I hit reload and it automatically finds it because I put it in the right spot. I did not have to re-navigate to find this file. Okay, so we're setting this up like this because also now anytime you go to set up like for a file to put a texture in, I click on this folder and it shows me where all the stuff is. All right, so when you're working with with anything that has attached files, which if any kind of attached texture file coming from Photoshop, just images from the internet, whatever it is, file, project window, check what your project is. If it's not correct, file, set project. And when you go to hand this in, you will have to zip this whole thing, which we'll go over that later, but it's basically just right click, send to compressed, bloody blah. All right. But if you are wanting to use attached texture files, this is an absolute must. I am not going to go through and reattach manually a zillion files. I won't even know which ones they are. There's things in there that you might attach and then they won't work. You don't want that. You really don't want that. All right. And as always, if you like technical written descriptions of things, Autodesk has an entire page on how to set a project. I'll have a link in next to this video. That kind of describes more technically what it's doing and how it's thinking, and also how it organizes stuff. Right, so how it thinks of these subdirectories and how to all of this is in here. So I'll have a link to this if you prefer written instructions.